All right, guys, we are back again with another COVID cabal. Another very, very serious COVID cabal. The most serious COVID cabal since COVID cabal season 2 began. I think we can call this, right? I think this is really season 2. I feel like everything we had from COVID to Biden's inauguration was COVID cabal season 1. And then I did these like smattering of shows for about 2 years later, and I feel like those were kind of like they weren't seasons. You know what I mean? They were kind of like when South Park went on hiatus and they had like a couple random episodes here and there just to keep people remembering, hey, you guys like the show? We're just doing a little stuff here and there. So we're back. This is ever since we started this up after Trump's inauguration. This is season 2. Okay, that's how we're talking about it now. This is a big show today. This is a big show. I'm gonna piss off a lot of people. I'm gonna try to piss off everybody. I'm gonna try to be fair and piss off every person here. So if you guys are here, I know some of you guys, because I actually gave notice about when this was going to start. Although then it took me 15 minutes to get my slides together. Some of you guys are already in the chat, but if you're here now and you're watching, drop a comment in the chat. Let me know you're here. Let me know you are watching this big COVID cabal, season 2 COVID cabal. Let's fucking go. We're back again. And actually, it is so significant of a show that even though COVID cabal these days doesn't always have wine, we don't always do what we did in season 1. I felt like I had to open one for this. So we have a wine from Poland. Poland is actually making, if you guys can see this, this is from the Wrocław area, which is Western Poland, formerly the German city of Breslau. Poland is actually, and I've seen this over the last decade, Poland's actually making a lot more wine. I'm not saying it's anything like amazing, but it's not bad. It's not bad, actually. Just, relatively simple. So let's try this. This is, whoa, what the fuck's going on with this? This smells like lime juice. This is wild. I've never smelled a wine that smells like this before. What is this? What is this varietal? Off dry, white, so it's got a little bit of sugar. They say it is delicate, fresh, and aromatic like summer evenings in the countryside. Seductive like the memory of a past love. Wow. Only in Poland do you see that kind of description. You wouldn't see that in America. Well, smells like lime juice. Doesn't quite taste quite as strong. Dzień dobry. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff, guys. It's nothing amazing, but it's good stuff. Very simple on the palate. But yeah, it does have this fragrance too. It's very floral. I wish I could pick the exact flower. It's almost, you know what it is? This is what, it's almost like wild rose. Not regular rose, but wild rose has this really sharp fragrance. That's almost what it smells like. Very interesting. So anyway, look, let's get into the content here. I know a lot of you guys are like, what the fuck? What is this guy doing? He's just drinking wine on here. He's stringing us along. I would not call it like a Pinot Grigio, to be honest, Romeo. Pinot Grigio to me is usually a little, especially from Northern Italy, where you usually get it. It's a bit more simple. I think actually Pinot Grigio is a pretty simple wine in general. Not that you can't have good stuff coming from it. It can have more mouthfeel because it's Pinot Gris. It actually has more tannic structure than a lot of white wines. You can actually make orange wine out of Pinot Grigio. A lot of orange wines are made out of it. But I don't know what this varietal is. My guess is it is not a standard varietal. especially because they're not even telling us, which makes sense. You know what I mean? Why would a lot of the wines around made in Poland are like hybrids and stuff because they can't handle the climate. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to piss some people off here, but I'm going to anchor this conversation as best as I can before we get into it. So the first thing, I just want to track back. Okay. I know in the world of news, it feels like forever ago. I know it feels like an eternity, but it was not even a week ago that everybody was freaking out. Everybody was freaking out about, they were freaking out about the immigration thing. They were freaking out that Trump was now going to start, like, he was not going to be arresting, farm workers, restaurant workers. He was cucking on immigration, as we like to say. Now, before I go into this, I want to say that I'm very happy that people put pressure on Trump. And I said this myself on Twitter, that I don't think you actually get good results if you don't put pressure on Trump. However, where I differ from some people, and only a little bit, because I do think that Trump, I think it's important for him personally to see what the base thinks. I think he's much more plugged into the base in this second term. I mean, we know as a fact already that most of his administration actually watches Twitter, right? Whereas in the first term, that wasn't really happening. Trump was disconnected. He was isolated. So I'm not trying to say this simply, in the sense that if he doesn't have that, him having people talk on Twitter about topics, this stuff trickles into him and trickles into his administration. So there's practical aspects to doing it from that standpoint because it gives him real-time feedback. However, there's more to it than just this. I actually think that he uses, and I said this online, he uses us as the bad cop in his negotiations. And I thought that there was a really good tweet I want to share with you guys, because everyone was freaking out about this immigration thing. As I said, as a few others said as well, right? We didn't think it was going to actually be a big deal. I was not convinced that this was going to last in any sort of meaningful sense. I didn't think it was that he was cucking on immigration. I thought it was part of a negotiating posture, part of a test maybe, but that it wasn't actually going to happen, because Trump knows at this point, not even withstanding, I think, what we're telling him, although, like I said, it helps on a personal level for him probably, but he knows what has to happen. Okay. At this point, with the bullet grazing his ear, he knows what has to happen. So no surprise, it literally took a few days and it was announced that Trump actually was not backing off on immigration at all. And I thought this was a really great way to put it. Trump officials reverse guidance exempting farms, hotels from immigration raids. Don't you guys get it yet? Trump is a deal maker, a salesman. Some people asked him for something, people he didn't want to alienate. If he had actually wanted to give it to them, he wouldn't have announced it. He would have just passed the orders down quietly, and it would have been months before anyone noticed. But Trump didn't want to give it to them, so he did an old salesman trick. Let me ask my boss. And he posted on social media that he was going to do it. And you all flipped out, wailing that Trump has betrayed us. And Trump finished his coffee. He doesn't drink coffee, by the way, guys. He finished his Diet Coke, walked back into the room and said, sorry, boss, no, but I can offer you a great deal on extended warranty. Why didn't I say this earlier? Because your job is to flip out and wail that Trump has betrayed us. This gives Trump the air cover he needs in order to say no. Carry on. I want you guys to remember this, because this is true. This same stuff is applying to some extent with Israel. Okay? It's applying to some extent with Israel. And I'm going to break this down. I'm going to explain it. There's a similar message from David Clemens, who was a big person with the 2020 election stuff. I don't get how unstable some of the conservative influencers are about Trump on immigration, war, free trade. Did the past 10 years not provide any insight into how he operates? In a 24-hour window, frequent ass-kissers now call him a traitor, that he betrayed MAGA, etc. Trump has a method to his madness. I stopped paying attention to what he says as the most reliable indicator as to what he actually believes. He has an uncanny ability to use his media appearances and social media posts to cause deep staters, warmongers, and globalists at cross purposes with his goals to constantly be off balance. He generates tells like a master poker player and uses the media's and people's responses to calibrate where MAGA principle needs to yield to MAGA pragmatism. He deals with domestic and foreign policy terrain as it exists, dispensing with the usual ivory tower debate as inferior to actionable maneuvering, where he can continue to improve the playing field regarding the big three issues above. Given enough time, the results follow. Focus on Trump's results. You want illegal restaurant staff and big agriculture employees deported? Fair enough, but don't lose sight that ICE is more active today than any time in the last 4 decades. You don't like the optics over what Trump knew in advance of Israel's preemptive strike? Fair enough, but he hasn't deployed our forces in an active theater of war yet. And his unbelievable restraint during his first term while surrounded by the likes of John Bolton and not going to war shows where his heart at. Think tariffs or taxes? Fair enough, but look at how he has sought to take a sledgehammer to business as usual with the globalists as prices are going down at the pump in grocery store while still generating trillions in investment. Those with eyes to see and ears to hear are witnessing greatness. Okay. Such an important message that Clemens just put there. And I couldn't agree with it more. I really need people who watch this show, who are out there online, to take a step back and think, is Trump on our side or is he not on our side? I don't understand what makes people, after Trump sacrificing for 10 years, including assassination attempts, I actually don't understand how the first thing after all, like, can you even imagine where we're at today compared to where we were at 10 years ago? In terms of awareness, the fact that we're even having these conversations, that we're, upset about going to war, that people are calling out the neocons and the Zionists, etc. None of this stuff was like when Trump came on stage, when he entered the political arena 10 years ago, none of this stuff, there was none of it. And he has, at enormous personal sacrifice, been in this fight for a full-on decade directly, right? And so when Trump takes a tact on an issue, when he knows what people actually think about it, why is our first impression, why is our instinct to be like, Trump's abandoning us, Trump's betraying us, Trump's a traitor, Israel stooge? This stuff to me is really neurotic. It's really neurotic. And look, it's one thing for you to say, I don't think Trump is making a good decision. I want it to be known that this is my position on the matter, right? Like Matt Walsh says, I respect this and I agree with this stuff. There's a lot of intentional obtuseness going on. Some of us are warning that we don't want a regime change war in the Middle East. Then we get throngs of accounts telling us that Trump isn't doing a regime change war, so we should just shut up. Yes, we know. He's not yet. We're speaking up loudly now because we want to make sure he doesn't happen. We've been alive for the past few decades and know how these things often go. We also hear highly influential war hawks like Lindsey Graham openly and explicitly call for regime change. It is perfectly reasonable for us to worry about such a possibility, and it behooves us to speak up now rather than waiting until the thing happens. If you agree that a regime change war is bad, why are you screeching at us? Aren't we on the same side in that cause? I am not upset about people like Matt Walsh. I'm not even upset with people like Tucker Carlson going on. I think he did a great job humiliating Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz should know the population and demographics of Iran if he's talking about regime change. Absolutely, he should. So I want it to be understood that I am not opposed to people speaking out about some of these measures, or at least demanding some degree of foresight with them. But if you don't actually trust Trump, if you think Trump is just a Zionist stooge and Trump is... Bibi Netanyahu's first order of business was to endorse Biden. It pissed off Trump. I don't see a lot of love between Netanyahu and Trump. I don't see it. and we're going to get into this, but there are reasons that people may be pursuing the same objective for different reasons. So I want to make a few things clear because, like I said, I'm going to piss off a lot of people here. Okay, I am under no illusions about the relationship between Israel and the United States. You are not going to find somebody who, in me, who actually genuinely believes that Israel is our best friend and has American interests at heart. I do not believe that for a second. From my own study of 9/11, I believe Israel was behind it. In the USS Liberty is not even, it's not even like under dispute. Okay? I know that's going to piss some people off to hear that. Israel, in their influence in Washington, in the Bush administration, especially with this sort of evangelical Christianity, like Bill Mitchell said today, I'm not even going to share that fucking tweet, that America only exists maybe to help Israel. Like, I don't even understand where, I understand actually, I know where it comes from. It comes from in the Bible, where Paul makes a comment about how we're grafted in, how Gentiles are grafted in. I'm aware of all this stuff. So they believe that we are basically, in some sense, like second-class citizens. By the way, I harbor no ill will towards Jews nor Israel, but I'm just making this point that you're not going to find in me that, like, I know Israel uses its influence in the United States, buying American politicians in order to pursue its own interests, and those interests have not been for a very long time in alignment with the United States because it got the United States into multiple different wars. Okay. So I'm saying all this stuff because I don't want people, who they inevitably will anyway, to call me an Israeli stooge or, whatever, that like I'm somehow all, that I'm this guy who, is just carrying water for Israel all the time. I'm not. So I want to get that out of the way, and I want to say that I'm aware of the dynamics. I'm aware of the situation. And I don't trust Netanyahu, and I don't think that he's definitely not operating in our interest. Okay. But I'm also going to say this. I don't give a fuck about Palestine, and I don't give a fuck about Iran. And if you think for 2 seconds, that those people would actually be supportive of America in any way, shape, or form, you are fucking off your rocker. Okay? You can say what you want about Israel's government. You can say what you want about the Zionists and the neocon connection between them. But if you have some desire to, for their own interests, and that, they maybe don't care as much about our interests and they're using us for their interests, whatever, the only interest of the Iranian government and the only interest of Palestinians is fuck the United States. Okay? Iran was very, very much responsible for the destabilization in Iraq after the invasion. The inability for us to actually build a nation there. By the way, not saying I support that, because I don't. I don't support the fact that we went on the ground there. But a major reason why it didn't work, and this is actually why it was a dumb reason to go to war, is because Iraq and Iran were counterbalances, right? But Iran was blowing up U.S. soldiers with their militias in Iraq, and they are actually the major reason that country fell apart. Hubris on our part to get involved, but Iran was on the other side of it. Iran is not a good country. These people, just because you can say, if you want to say Israel's bad, fine, say Israel's bad. That doesn't mean Iran is good. It doesn't mean Iran is good. And I really have to emphasize this for people, because you see this whole portion of the American right, not all of them, by the way, but they're like, oh, the BRICS, the BRICS we're all together. The BRICS are against American imperialism, American Zionist imperialism, blah, 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 blah. The BRICS are not a real fucking thing, guys. Can people wake up about this for a second? Can people wake up about the BRICS? The BRICS are not a real thing. Most of Russia's military is not on the border with Ukraine. At least it wasn't a couple of years ago. It was on the border with Russia, with China. Okay? Russia's going to get involved if something happens to Iran. No, they're not. Putin just distanced himself from Iran. Putin called Trump, who informed him that America would not restrain Israel. Putin called Khamenei and basically told him, yeah, I'd start thinking about taking the deal now. Putin sent a warning to Iran's leader saying that his regime is in danger, informed him of the call's outcomes, and advised him to move quickly towards negotiations. Additionally, Putin ordered the evacuation of Russian embassy personnel from Tehran. That doesn't sound like Russia's getting involved in the war. Russia's much more in a neutral posture. They're given some sound bites here and there. We don't think that what Israel's doing was in support of international law. Well, guess what? What happened in Syria? Let's put some things together here for a second here, please. Put some things together here. Russia's great ally in the Middle East, Assad, right? What happened to Assad? Everything fell apart just like that. Well, it fell apart just like that because everybody in the region decided they didn't need Assad anymore. Israel wanted him gone because Israel wanted to be able to attack Iran. They needed the airspace in Syria, which the Syrian government basically gave to Israel because Mossad was involved in the entire coup. And everyone was like, what's Russia going to do? Russia looks weak. No, Russia didn't care. Russia still has its port in the Black Sea. It was a deal, okay? BRICS are not a real fucking thing. They're a bunch of big sound bites, but these countries are all sovereign countries who have their own interests. What Russia wants is a north-south corridor. Iran, being at tension with every other country in the region, by the way, not just Israel, but also Turkey, but also Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Iran is not necessarily Russia's best friend. Russia's not, this is not some like super strong alliance. I'm really so tired of hearing the BRICS stuff. Like I listened to the Duran for years. They've had some good stuff on the Russia-Ukraine war. I even listened to their transcripts in prison. I had transcripts. One of the guys in there was getting transcripts from the Duran, and I was reading the Duran, right? So I know this whole corner, like the alt media. Look, it's good to get a balanced perspective because the Western media is propaganda, right? Well, guess what? The Duran and all these things is also propaganda. You have to understand it's all propaganda. All these people, they're not operating without any kind of agenda. They all have their axe to grind, whether they're being paid or not, they have their axe to grind. And they have their biases. The Duran was wrong about many things in the Russia-Ukraine war. They talked for a long time about how Ukraine was just going to fold and how Russia was destroying them. Well, Russia's winning the war. There's no doubt about that. But if you had listened to the Duran, you would have thought the war would have been over 2 years ago. Obviously wasn't the case. I'm saying this stuff because I'm trying to like paint this picture of this gray zone picture. Okay? Like, let's look at some retarded stuff here. Here's something retarded. Mossad VIP blackmail material hacked by Iran days before Israel declared wars. Just before the first strikes, Iranian state hackers pulled off one of the most devastating cyber ops in modern history. They seized 3 terabytes of top secret Israeli intelligence, not just military secrets, but compromised files detailing Israel's vast surveillance operations, including deep cover programs in the United States. And within that trove, evidence of crimes, unspeakable crimes, implicating some of the most powerful people on earth. This isn't just about war. It's about blackmail, betrayal, global house of cards on the brink of collapse. What the fuck is this nonsense? If they actually had this stuff and this is a real war that they're going to lose, why not just drop it? Just drop all the information out there. Like Iran, like Israel's bombing Iran to stop their blackmail from coming out. We know Israel spies on the United States. We know about this kind of stuff. Here's the reality that a lot of people don't want to hear is that Israel fucked up Iran in those initial strikes. They truly fucked them up. Israel was expecting like 5,000 casualties in this, and I think last I've heard recorded, there's like 11 people from all these Iranian rockets. And look, I'm not saying that Iran doesn't necessarily have more rockets stored up than Israel thought. And I'm not saying that Israel has unlimited interceptors. I understand these stories. I understand. I'm not saying Israel is all invincible on its own or that they can sustain this war indefinitely. I'm not saying any of that stuff. But I have been hearing this BRICS all-powerful, crazy, super alliance opposing the United States bullshit all the way since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it's not reflective of reality. China was arming Ukraine with drones up until a couple weeks ago. China was actually supportive of the war with Ukraine because what did it do? It took Russia away from Russia before the war in Ukraine. Russia had huge amounts of trade with Europe. After the war in Ukraine, Russia's economy is globally isolated. They have to rely on Chinese financial networks and markets, and they have to rely on Chinese economic markets for their resources. So what happened was China got leverage over Russia. It's like they're standing together, but they each have each other in a headlock. That's really what it's about, which is why Russia and Trump are getting along so well, because Russia, Putin wants to move Russia away from China. It's actually a lot more dangerous for Russia to be tied to China than it is for Russia to be an independent actor with balanced trade in connections with the West. Okay? I know this isn't directly related to the Iran-Israel thing, but I want you guys to think in these terms. Stop thinking of these people like monolithic groups. Neither side is a monolithic group. You talk about the BRICS being a monolithic group. They're not. You talk about the collective West being a monolithic group. They're not. You have Davos. You have the Anglosphere city of London, which is connected, very much connected to Davos. Some slightly different agendas, of which Israel is connected to as well, right? You have the neocon group and the neoliberal group, and then you have MAGA, right? Plus Hungary, true nationalist movements. You see all these BRICS accounts talk about how, like, see, Trump really loves Zelensky. Like, no, you're a fucking retard. You have no idea what's going on. You have no idea. These are groups you have within each the BRICS and the sort of collective West. You have groups that are trying to break out of this nonstop conflict bullshit paradigm and trying to break out of it and have good relations, but they're stuck in this web of like superficial, I don't want to say just superficial, but like expected alliances that they have to be working together in a certain sense. We're in NATO with Europe. The paradox is that our biggest enemies is actually the European Union. If you look at Trump's financial policy, which, by the way, that's another one, right? It's another one. The dollar is not going to be the reserve currency anymore. The dollar's going down. And what was supposed to go up? Was it supposed to be the euro? What was the strategy? Well, it doesn't matter anymore because all the capital in the world is going to the United States because Trump's in power. That plan doesn't exist anymore, okay? Or I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's not operational. Med said this really well. Conspiracy-minded types really fell off since COVID. Seems they hit their peak around then. They were right about too many things at once, blew a fuse. Now they don't have much left to offer. Very predictable. The Jews, cool stuff. Normies have better instincts at this point. And that's what I said. They haven't been able to adjust to changing circumstances, most crucially that we are now winning. The irony is the exposure of these conspiracies is why we're in such a good position. It screwed up the globalist plans, but they haven't internalized this. They're stuck in a time capsule. It's absolutely the case. It's absolutely the case. They're still repeating how they're just going to print money. Look, that was maybe the plan, but they don't have full control of the border anymore. People see it. Things have changed. There's rival leadership in the United States compared to their plan. So how is the same thing going to happen? People have lost the ability to think about the situation. And I'm going to say this, and this is why I want my whole thing about, my understanding about the relationship between the US and Israel, etc. But the reality is that dynamics change over time. They change because there's more information, there's more awareness of the public, and the vis-a-vis power dynamic changes. Right now in Iran, I'm going to ask you guys this. How are people going to feel? How is MAGA going to feel if this happens? Let's say we do have regime change in Iran. Okay, I'm not disputing that regime change may ultimately be the objective. Well, does it matter? Does it actually matter if we don't put any boots on the ground and we suffer no real consequences for it? If Israel takes out Iran's leadership and there's a regime change and we don't have to go on boots on the ground for anything, why do we even care? Why does MAGA care? Has anyone thought about that for a second? Has anyone for a second even considered this? Okay, well, it's reminiscent of the stuff with Iraq and Afghanistan. We have like a trauma trigger. I get it. The reality is that Israel may have its reasons for wanting to, take out the Iranian leadership, and it may be different from ours because right now Trump gave Iran 60 days. Now, it's very possible that Israel jumped the gun. I don't want to say they jumped the gun. I don't think they jumped the gun. I think that they wanted to do this fight, and Trump said, let's make a deal. Let's see if they'll make a deal. Well, guess what? Iran wouldn't make the deal. Now, you can say, well, if you give them a few more days, they would have made the deal. Maybe they would have made the deal, but here's the reality. We know that they were enriched to 60%. We know that. We know for a fact that they were enriched to 60%, okay? So if they were enriched to 60%, there's no civilian use for that whatsoever. Okay, most medical uses are 5%, or energy uses are 5%. Some medical uses get the 20% enrichment. When you get the 60% enrichment, there's only military use for that. And getting from 60 to 85, 90, which is what you need to produce a bomb, takes about a week. So you see more fake news going around that, Tulsi supports Trump. Tulsi doesn't support Trump. Trump's going against Tulsi. They're clipping out part of her speech. This is what she said. The intelligence community, by the way, not her. She said the intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. The IC is closely monitoring if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program. In the past year, we have seen an erosion of a decades-long taboo in Iran on discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest level and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Iran continues to seek expansion of its influence in the Middle East, despite the degradation to its proxies and defenses during the Gaza conflict. Iran has developed and maintains ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, UAVs, including systems capable of striking U.S. targets and allies in the region. Tehran has shown a willingness to use these weapons, including during a 2020 attack on U.S. forces in Iraq and in attacks against Israel in April and October 2024. Iran's cyber operations and capabilities also present a serious threat to U.S. networks and data. You didn't hear any of this stuff in the clip. You only heard those first two sentences. And then literally, like today or yesterday, Tulsi Gabbard confirms she and President Trump are on the same page when it comes to Iran's nuclear timeline. She's actually even calling out these things. President Trump was saying the same thing that I said in my annual threat assessment back in March. Unfortunately, too many people in the media don't care to actually read what I said. Yeah, they don't care because they're being disingenuous. So why are they being disingenuous? Why are they being disingenuous? Why are they lying about this? Iran was supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. They are terror organizations. You can dislike Israel, whatever. You can dislike Israel. Don't feed me this shit that Iran is this sponsor for, this poor little, perfect little state that's just being bullied by the world. Okay? You get annoyed when Israel says this kind of stuff, but you don't get annoyed when Iran says it. I don't know. I'm tired of this stuff. I'm tired of it. Israel, it's not critical thinking. It's just knee-jerk reactions. That's all it is. We don't want a nuclear Iran. Russia doesn't want a nuclear Iran. Iran, you know the main reason that Iran didn't accept the deal? Because as part of the deal, Iran was going to have the nuclear enrichment in a third-party country. And that third-party country could have been Russia. That wasn't the sticking point. Probably would have been Russia. Iran wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't accept it. They weren't operating in good faith. So if Bibi Netanyahu has a Zionist goal to take out the leadership in Iran, or simply some practical reason as well, that Israel, I think, somewhat reasonably views Iran as a threat to them. I don't think Iran's a threat to the United States with its nuclear weapons, okay? But Israel views that. Well, I mean, they have their own personal reasons for wanting to do it. Israel wants to strike Iran. Trump says, give them 60 days to sort a deal. 60 days hit. Iran still isn't making the deal. Israel says, we're doing it. Trump may not have liked that. Trump may have preferred. And there was a clip where you could see that he was like, it's going to make things worse. But he let him off the leash. They were going to do it. Let me see here. Is this what I'm looking for here? Is this my... No, it's not the one I'm looking for. Maybe I didn't put it up here. It doesn't really matter. The big thing here is that we are dealing with a lot of complicated variables, and the Iranian regime is not necessarily good for the United States. Now, I understand people saying, how is it really bad for us? Why do we care? I understand these questions. I get it. But Trump has been saying for a very long time that it was a major issue. It was a red line for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. If you view this through the correct lens, which is that Iran's government is not operating in good faith and is also trying to stir up perpetual conflict in the region. Because, by the way, let's think of it from this perspective. The tension in the Middle East increases the price of oil, which also doesn't benefit Europe. So to have this constant proxy that you can work with, that you can stir up issues and tension with, I'm not disputing that there are probably some factions that want to have World War III. I'm not disputing this. But if Trump is able, and we're going to find out, right? But if Trump is actually able to get regime change in Iran, some sort of peace agreement, and we don't drop any bombs and certainly don't have any troops involved, or certainly don't have any, military losses, isn't then the answer to this question that Trump is actually a genius? That we actually got everything that we wanted and you got mad, but like, you're not going to be able to convince me that in the same lens where you say why we shouldn't go to war against Iran to change the government. you're also not going to get me to say that it's a big deal if this government, which sponsors terror groups, also gets changed. Like, I don't want to like belabor this, but I'm gonna check the comments real quick and see where you guys are at with this. I'm gonna try to, you know, answer some questions that I see here, but we may have had, and I think we did have, some very, very overlapping agendas with Israel here. And the difference is that if this is an acute issue for Israel, maybe 20 years ago, they got us to do all the dirty work for them. But Trump's making them do their own work. And Israel's putting in the work. They're putting in the work. I'm sorry. I'm not impressed with what I've seen from I see all these BRICS accounts going like, oh, look at all these missiles. You know, Iran's amazing. It's incredible. I'm not seeing it. Maybe it'll change. I'm not seeing it. And actually, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing nobody come to Iran's defense. Have you noticed that? Nobody is coming to Iran's defense. Nobody. Russia's not coming to their defense. China's not coming to their defense. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, nobody is coming to Iran's defense. They lost. From what I can see, Iran has lost. They went too far trying to get the nuclear bomb. All they had to do is just not get the nuclear bomb. I understand. We're like, well, why did we have to do? If we don't suffer any consequences for this, why do we care? What on the same side? Why do you care? Hoping and praying that the crown prince Reza Pahlavi can come back from exile to lead Iran. I've been hearing about this. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be him. I don't know what the story is going to be. I don't know what the story is going to be. I have no ill will towards the Iranian people. Just as I have no ill will towards the Israelis. I mean, I'm going to say this, guys. The average Israeli, and I know that a lot of people don't care about it. They don't care about it, but they are really just people trying to live their own life. And they are in a country surrounded by hostile neighbors. And you can talk about why, that there are factions in the government who, whatever. But the bottom line is that if we are all here to try to look at our things from a self-interested perspective, right? I completely understand Israel's self-interest here. As an objective person, I am not upset about what Israel does. I don't like being manipulated into doing things for somebody else's self-interest when it doesn't necessarily benefit our own. But if Israel is able to take care of this and it fulfills an American objective, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to say, no, Israel, we're going to support Iran? Why would we support Iran? Why would we support Iran? Let's see what's going on down here. He also signaled that he was open to lobbying and probably got many people to show themselves as stooges. Well, I think this is correct. I think that there's a lot of loyalty test stuff that goes on with Trump and these things. This is another thing, by the way. This is, and I apologize, guy, because I was going on my thing. I won't lose my train of thought. But this is going back to the mass deportation stuff until DHS gets additional funding, Senate GOP, reducing funding in the bill. Yes, the risk playing along with Israel or risk losing votes in the bill. That's true. It's more than that, though. It's also that a lot of these things, even with like the hotel, going back to the other stuff, like that was some threats from people in Congress that you can't get rid of this category of illegal immigrant. And that was one of the things that Trump puts it out to the public. The backlash is really swift. He can say like, look, I can't change this. He's making them expose themselves. Like Rand and Massey lost enormous amounts of political credibility. I'm sure people are building up Massey now again as a result of all this stuff. But I'm sorry, you're just not going to get me. Just in the same sense that you're not going to get me to like shill for Israel. You're not going to get me to just like be anti-Israel for the sake of being anti-Israel. You're not going to get that from me. You're not going to get me to take Iran's side over Israel in this conflict. And you need to pay attention to, are you getting brainwashed into having to pick one way or another? That's really, to me, the big point I want to get across here is that there is 0% chance that Trump is going to invade Iran. First off, I know I'm going to go through the rest of these comments, but first off, how are you even logistically going to pull that off? When we invaded Iraq, we had Kuwait and we had Saudi Arabia to a certain extent to invade from. Okay? And we already had no-fly zones established in the top. We had NATO bordering Iraq through Turkey. How are we going to invade Iran now? We're not going to be able to do it from Iraq. We lost Afghanistan. Can't do it from Afghanistan. You're going to do it from Armenia? It's like one road in the mountains. There's not even a premise for doing this stuff. So people are responding. And again, I support putting the pressure out and saying, President Trump, we don't want to go to war. I support that. I don't want to go to war. I'm anti us being interventionist. We cannot have ever again anything remotely like the global war on terror with the Bush years. But we are the biggest power player in the world. And there is a difference between ceding power vacuums to other countries and being militarily interventionist. Trump is working with the other major countries. This is what I'm trying to point out here. Russia and even China are on the same page to a large extent with Iran. I'm not saying they agree about everything with it, but everybody in all the big players are showing each other respect. And they're all agreeing that Iran shouldn't be getting a nuclear weapon. They're all agreeing that. Russia and China might say Israel's strike was wrong, it shouldn't have happened. Trump might say, well, it was inevitably going to happen, but they all agreed on the substantial issues. And this is happening because, if Iran is making things difficult for Russia and for China, you better believe they're going to abandon them, just like Assad had outlived its purpose in Syria. You never see any of these BRICS people talk about that. You never see them talk about what happened in Syria. And you can't say that Russia was outmaneuvered because Russia continues to have its base. 0 problems. Russia lost nothing from that. Iran lost. Iran has lost Hamas. They've lost Hezbollah. And they lost the support from Assad. So what I see, analyzing geopolitics, is I see Iran getting isolated geopolitically. And I see a big, propaganda thing that's telling everyone to freak out about it. Let's keep going here. Brian Berletic says the U.S. is using Israel as a proxy to get regime change in Iran, similar to Ukraine being used as a proxy against Russia. So I am going to give this like a half correct thing, in my opinion. And when I say half correct, it's not that it's not that I disagree that Israel is maybe going to create regime change in Iran and America is going to benefit it. But which faction specifically? This is the stuff that Brian Berletic and the Duran, they don't do because to some extent, and again, there's a lot of good analysis. I highly recommend you watch their stuff to balance out what we get in the West. But this is not like Trump didn't use Ukraine as a proxy against Russia, right? Trump didn't use Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. He didn't. He actually froze that conflict and was ostensibly trying to work out a deal with it. The war was before Trump and after Trump. And it's created a big headache for Trump. Trump is entangled, U.S. is entangled with it. But by the way, the last of the funding for Ukraine ends in a month, end of this month, I believe. So what's going to happen next? So when we say Ukraine being used as a proxy against Russia. Davos was using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. Not Trump, not MAGA. So is MAGA using Israel as a proxy to get regime change in Iran? I don't see that happening. What I see is that Trump wants regime change in Iran and doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Israel is definitely does not want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And maybe Netanyahu wants there to be a bigger conflict. Maybe there is some element there. But I see it more that Trump is letting Israel do the dirty work for the US without having to own the consequences of it. That's what I see happening, which is, by the way, very, it's not completely different than on like a superficial level from using Ukraine against Russia, but it's a matter of which faction is using which faction. I think if Biden or Kamala were president right now, maybe Kamala would have been a problem. And maybe this is one of the reasons why, in the end, you saw like a lot of the neocons move away from Kamala, because maybe Kamala, was too pro-Palestine or whatever. I think when she got in the office, she wouldn't have had a lot of her own willpower. But suffice to say, maybe they didn't trust that she would be willing to do this. But I think Trump is threading the needle. Let's look at what Charlie said here, right? 86% of Americans don't want Iran to get nuclear weapons. 60% of Americans don't want the U.S. involved in a war with Iran. Only a statement of the highest order can navigate a situation like this. Trump is made for this moment. I agree with this. Iran was building nukes. This is true. The neocons kept using that truth to cover their agenda in a righteous cause, which is to take over the world like good little Trotskyites. The best lies have a nugget of truth. I have said, you guys who watch my other shows, I've said from the very beginning of season 2 of COVID Cabal that I have seen a frenemies dynamic between Trump and Netanyahu. They are both trying to use each other for counter purposes. But, and I think they both might be thinking that they can pull the other one in. Maybe Netanyahu thinks he can pull the U.S. into the conflict. Maybe Trump thinks that he can get Netanyahu to do the dirty work with that while staying out of it. Who's going to win? My bet's on Trump. But this is what's going on here. It's not this like, it's a little bit of a different dynamic. Israel had extremely strong intel that Iran was ready to destroy Hormuz, forcing $400 barrel oil, plus the fact that they were always ready to make the whole world glow in the dark. Iran has always been bad. Yeah, I agree with this. I absolutely agree with it. I mean, I will say that Iran could always do this stuff, and it stands to reason why hasn't Iran done it yet. It may happen. Can Iran still shut down global shipping? How far is this going to go? We still have a lot of answers to questions here, but so far, I mean, Iran last night, almost like literally a day ago, they said what we do tonight is going to be remembered for centuries. The thing of all, the fight of, the moment of all moments. Well, look, I'm going to give them that maybe they're talking about tonight. So let's see what happens. But so far, but really, if you judge that tweet by when it came out, they should have been talking about last night, and literally nothing happened. Nothing happened, let alone something that's going to be remembered for centuries. So we'll see. But I'm kind of starting to think there's a bit of a bluff going on here with Iran. They had Hezbollah. Hezbollah is totally neutered to the fact that Lebanon's government is even telling Hezbollah, shut the fuck up. You're not doing things without, if we tell you can't do it. That has not been the dynamic between Israel and Hezbollah for a really long time. Hamas is totally gutted. You may not like this stuff, but they are what they are. The bottom line is Iran has been losing. It's been a long march of losing for a while. And I haven't seen anything change that. And no amount of propaganda videos or whatever is going to change that reality. Iran's losing. Israel's winning. That's the way it is. I don't know if Iran is one of the last countries left outside of the central banking system. If one of you guys know this, say something about this. Do I think U.S. is involved in the Iran-Israel war or not? I do not. I mean, in terms of giving intelligence, yeah, I think for sure it is. I think for sure it is. But only things that would be expected. I don't expect that. I don't know that we've given them weapons. We may have given them some weapons. I guess it just depends on what you mean by involved. But I mean, I don't think we're not involved. I mean, even if we were to pull back Ukraine aid, it would be a really big step to stop providing signal intelligence, through satellites, right? I mean, right now they're using Starlink for so many of the stuff that they have, but a lot of the reasons also that Ukraine's been able to continue in the war is because it gets U.S. signal intelligence. So we're supporting them, but that's different support than it's different support than giving, arms. For instance, let me give an analogy. During the Falklands War, that was a war between the United Kingdom and Argentina. The U.S. was neutral because actually we kind of had a little bit of an alliance with both of them because the dictatorship in Argentina was anti-communist and so was ostensibly allied with us. Reagan took a very, very publicly neutral position on the matter. It did supply, however, Britain with intelligence during the war. So you could say, does that mean that we were involved with the war? It wasn't enough on its own to flip the war in a direction, but certainly helped a little bit, helped their execution a little bit. I feel for the people of Iran, not the regime. I feel exactly the same way. I have zero against the Iranian people. I hear a lot of very positive things about the Iranian people. But I also like Israeli people. Okay, like I know a lot of Israeli people as well. Oh, I'm a shill now. I found out. I like a lot of them. I think there are a lot of good people there. Okay, and the intrigues and objectives of governments, we always have to remember to keep this separation in our minds, to not be hating the public because of necessarily a regime operation. Hi, Pat. The courts, the agencies, the Fed, both parties, the militaries seem like a full frontal attack by every government agency against Trump. Crazy times. Absolutely. And I'd also say this, that it really does feed into a lot of the agenda, the neocon agenda, to split Trump's coalition. There's a difference to me between people who say because Trump is saying that, saying some mean tweets, right? Here's some mean tweets here. Let's show some mean tweets. Unconditional surrender. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out or kill, at least not for now, but we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers or patients is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA. Okay. Classic Trump promotional tweet, right? Whatever. But the bottom line is Trump says this stuff and everyone's losing their mind over it. Okay, look, very different to say, President Trump, please do not go to war with Iran. Please don't put boots on the ground in Iran. We don't want to get involved in this conflict. It's not worth it. We have too many problems at home. Please remember your election promises. We love you, right? That's loyal opposition to a specific policy, which you're not even assuming that he's doing necessarily. You can say that you're wary about it. You're not sure. Fair enough. There's every reason to be making those posts and making it known that you do not support war in Iran. But when you say like he's betrayed us, he hasn't fucking done anything yet. He's put out some tweets, okay? Maybe provided some intelligence to Israel. We have not lost a single thing so far. A single thing. So if you're freaking out about it, you've lost the plot. Simple as. Simple as. So, I mean, look, guys, I love you, and I think I got all the questions here in the slides. I don't want to belabor all of this stuff, but Trump is, and I'm going to show this right here. Announce every move. It's really not a smart idea. It's almost like they are posturing. You know, that's true for anybody who's smart with war. Iran may be doing some of that. Trump's certainly doing it too. We do not know all of the objectives in this war. We don't know what Trump has planned with this. It may be designed to you know, as there may be a lot of elements to it in terms of how it's maybe shaking Israel's control over U.S. politics. It's making people more and more aggravated about it. It may have a lot of really good downstream effects. You know, I think Tom says it really well here. Israel executed and people are resisting the mimetic collapse of the propaganda. Iran was never the good guy because you believe Israel was the bad guy. Neither are the bad guys. They're both doing what they consider right by their tribe. We should learn this lesson. I can live with that. I can also live with there are no good guys here if it amounts to the same thing. There are no alliance, geopolitics, only interests. Trump and Netanyahu's interests align here for different reasons. The rest is cope. And I agree. If we get our objectives met and we don't have to pay any cost for it, stop complaining about it. Okay? And look, you're going to see me. I promise you guys this. I promise you, if this war escalates, the U.S. gets involved, we start losing like carrier groups, it becomes a sinkhole. You better believe, you absolutely better believe I'm going to be right there with you saying Trump fucked up big time. Trump fucked up big time. I'll say that if that happens. I'm going to tell you, like, I do not think that's going to happen. I think just like with tariffs, just like with immigration, just like with North Korea, right? Just like with all of these different places, we start to get what we want without the cost of it. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with Ukraine too, because Russia is going to get what they want in Ukraine. This is a situation where Trump's negotiating position is lower, and I think probably Trump will be trading some things on the board, or Putin will be trading some things on the board for cooperation on the matter in Ukraine. But the reason it's difficult for Trump is because this happened prior to Trump. Things were already sucked in at the time. It's not the case in this situation. Trump is able to control much more of our own escalation ladder. This isn't the case with Zelensky in Ukraine because we don't own him. Davos does. And Romeo, I think this is a great comment to end on. Hopefully this hastens the end of the Ukraine-Russia war soon. And I think it will. I think it will. And I do not think that this is going to spill over too much in the Middle East. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I certainly think it's going to change a lot in the world. Make no mistake about that. I think it's extremely consequential. This is not a nothing's happening. The only thing I'm going to stick by is that whatever happens, whether there's a regime change operation in Iran, that the United States is not going to get sucked into World War III from it. That's the one thing I'm going to hang my hat on, because Trump knows that. Trump doesn't want it. And if someone's telling you Trump wants it, I think they have to be disingenuous, to be honest. I think they have to be disingenuous because you could say he's making a bad judgment decision, but if you think that he wants that, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to end with this last thing, okay? Back in, was it 2016, 2017? I think it was 2017. It must have been 2017. I think it was spring of 2017. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong here. There was a massive escalation. That's when you had the white helmet situation in Syria, and they were saying Trump had to put boots on the ground in Syria. A lot of you guys remember this. And Trump made some very strong statements, and he fired a few missiles. And for 1 week, for literally 1 week in his entire presidency, people thought that like Trump was being praised by the media because Trump was going along with the fucking script. So they thought. Trump had literally nobody in his corner in that administration. His security advisor was Bolton, John Bolton, right? Biggest neocon out there. And he's doing this whole thing. And what happened? What was the result of all of this? Trump didn't put boots on the ground. He pissed them all off. They were so livid. So you have to remember, this is somebody who opposed the Iraq war before it happened, criticized it for the first time as a major candidate, especially a Republican candidate, on the stage 10 years ago, tore apart Jeb Bush for it, for the Iraq war. Trump's track record, the result track record, his disposition is extremely clear. So if Trump feels strongly that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and he has a way of making sure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, and you know that Trump doesn't want to put boots on the ground, you have to have some degree of faith in these things. You have to say, okay, we know that Trump isn't going to put boots on the ground. We know that Trump isn't going to get us immersed in a foreign war, because literally every single thing else that Trump has done his entire time for the last 10 years has been to not get us involved in a foreign war. But what else do we know? We know that Trump has talked really tough and said some pretty crazy things that have actually led to more peace and stability that people have been constantly trying to tie down, tear apart, whether it was the North Korea deal, whether it was the Abraham Accords. But you have to trust what Trump's intention and objective is. Whether he can thread the needle is something to be seen. But he clearly believes that the benefits of what he's doing outweigh the potential costs. And when you're a leader, you have to make difficult decisions. And when you are a follower of a leader, I'm not saying you follow blindly, but you have to have some degree of trust that when you're dealing with a visionary genius like Trump, that you are going someplace good. I have that. I'm not panicking. I'm trusting the plan, always trusting the plan. Even when I was in prison, I was trusting the plan. Okay? You can say I'm crazy for doing it. I think that we're ending up in a better and better place as time goes on. But there's going to be a lot of instability. There's a lot of people who want things to spiral. The way out of this is not necessarily going to be linear, guys. It's not. Just hate to tell you that. It's not going to be linear. See what happens. All right. I love you all, and I will see you on the next show. Tomorrow we have a Dynamic Man podcast. We are going to be talking about, well, why girls make guys wait for sex. So I hope to see you guys on there. Different topic for sure. Take care.